Hey everyone, Jeff Dorman here, back for another edition of That's Our Two Satoshis Live, courtesy of Arca. I'm joined by my colleague and friend, Andew Stein. Andrew, how are you?
Good. How's it going, Jeff?
Well, I'd say doing okay, but clearly didn't make it through the weekend unscathed. I don't know if you noticed, but the market crashed a little bit on Friday night here in the U.S. Did you happen to notice that?
I did. It was a quite the sell-off.
It was the sixth one of that magnitude this year, by the way. Which for those who are looking to put a little hopium in the market for the next couple of weeks here, the sixth time that happened of a 20% or more drawdown for the market this year. Also, the same thing as what happened in 2017, and we know what happened at the end of the year in 2017. So a little bit of hope there. But let's talk about what happened and why. Why did the market get killed on Friday? I think to me, it all starts with the macro scene. We look at a lot of risk factors. I've mentioned this on the show before of all the different things we're looking at to indicate health or weakness of the market. Pretty much everything digital asset specific has been healthy. It's really just been the macro that has been fallen on tough times here. But what I think was interesting was if you go back 3 weeks ago, the market was terrified of rising inflation, rising rates, strengthening U.S. dollar. Then all of a sudden, Omicron appeared, and all that went away. Right? The now we're back into deflationary fears. The rates went from, I think the 10-year went from 160 down to 135. The dollar stopped rising. But because of the combination of Omicron as well as the Fed taking their foot off the gas on all the stimulus and all the dovish policies of the last decade, we had a pretty nasty week in equities. Right, the Nasdaq fell 2.5%. The VIX hit a year-to-date high. Massive Treasury curve flattening. From you go down the list, the Russell 2000 got crushed. Kathy Wood's ARC fund got annihilated. The put call ratio for tech stocks rose faster than it has all year. It was pretty ugly for risk assets across the board. And in fact, at one point during the day on Friday, I actually tweeted out that the digital asset space was feeling pretty healthy, given that the Nasdaq was getting crushed, the Russell was getting crushed, the VIX was moving, and there really was nothing happening in digital assets until we got to Friday night. We had huge dispersion actually in the market relative up until the weekend, where even though the overall market was lower, you had a lot of things that were up and a lot of things that were down. So, in my opinion, I don't know what you think, Andrew. I think there was a little foreshadowing here with what we saw in tech stocks and what we
Totally.
saw in the market. I don't know if anyone anticipated that kind of a move. I'm sure there was a couple, and tip of the hat to you who did anticipate that big of a move. But what were you thinking throughout the week versus when you woke up, presumably Saturday morning, and saw where prices were?
Yeah, I mean everything was holding in pretty well till that sell-off, and then I think you got into this in our blog today, but it was interesting. Everything has a correlation of one on the way down, but it's interesting to see some of the winners with like really good fundamentals right now rebound on the way up. And so, we try to be all over that with how things traded after the mayhem here.
Yes, Andrew, you're big. You're a big lunatic. You've been covering Luna for a long time. I know you were, just full disclosure, a large investor here at Arca as well. What were you seeing with regard to the actual metrics and the strength in something like Luna that led to Luna hitting all-time highs and actually rising 27% last week, while everything else in the market was down 20 to 40%?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's just starting to get clued in on how much underlying traction, TVL, value locked growth in the system, and then also the fact that UST, which is the stable coin that Luna governs, is really expanding its growth into other ecosystems, whether that be Ethereum, Solana, the Cosmos ecosystem, and with that big of a sell-off, that was just more market induced, but with strong fundamentals. I think everyone who's tracking that saw it as a great buy opportunity and started to pile in.
Yeah, I think the price action is really interesting. So myself, having been a capital markets banker, having been a bond and equity trader for a long time before getting into digital assets, I think price action like this is awesome when you see it, right? Because nothing was spared in the initial sell-off. If you're looking, I don't know what time it was. It was over here in LA. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night on Friday, probably midnight your time in Miami. But when you looked at the initial sell-off, everything moved together. And what usually happens is there's a few names that are actually being sold, most likely Bitcoin and ETH and a couple liquid names. But everything else just gets taken down because the market makers take everything down, right? If you know you're getting hit on one thing and you're running a balanced book, by definition, if you're hit on one thing and you get longer, you got to sell something else or take it down to make sure you don't get even more long. So you saw everything, including Luna, just get annihilated, right? It was a pretty classic move lower, right? Where it starts to drift lower, then all of a sudden it hits a price point where it starts to liquidate futures. The futures liquidation engines start going. Market makers take everything down algorithmically. What I thought was interesting, though, is like I said, Luna got taken down just as hard. ETH got taken down just as hard. But immediately, once the carnage ended, those were bid up. And I think what that means is, even if you have the most buy pressure in the world and the most rationale for buying, like we do here with Ethereum and with Luna for all the fundamentals that we mentioned, and we have a couple of charts in there in our write-up to validate that, it still was down 15 or 20% first before the buyers were able to get there. And that's pretty indicative of what we see in the digital asset space historically, which is it's really hard to fight these liquidation sell-offs. One is, there's not enough people who have money in the right places to get bids in. It takes time to move assets across, whether from your bank to an exchange or from one exchange to another. The dealer desks aren't really interested in committing capital, so it's not like you can just stick a bid out there for 50 million and say, "Hey, I want to buy all the Luna you can find." So a lot of damage can occur to price before the actual buyers step in. But when you see a chart, and again, we have this chart in our write-up this week on our blog at ar.ca /blog, but you can see Luna went down step for step with Bitcoin and ETH for the first 10, 20 minutes of that sell-off. And then Luna took off and was off to the races, outperforming from there on out the rest of the weekend. And I think this is what people who use leverage, people who trade perpetuals, people who are trading with decent amount of leverage in the system. It doesn't really matter if you're ultimately right, because these liquidation engines can be stronger than any of the actual bids. And moreover, I think what's interesting is, this is going to be, I don't know if you hear this as well, Andrew, but there's all kinds of people out there who say digital assets are all just one asset. They all move together, student body left, student body right. And now they're all high-fiving and cheering because of a move like this. But if you think about it, the same thing happened 6 months ago, right? If you go to May of 2021, same thing happened, right? We had a big washout across the whole market. And then what happened over the next 6 months? Well, Bitcoin's been completely flat. Bitcoin hasn't moved in 6 months. ETH is up 50%. Most protocols are up 50 to 300%, like Luna and Solana and Avalanche. NFTs and gaming are up 1,000%. DeFi is down 50%, and Web3 has been a mixed bag. Pretty much all over the place. So I think what to me that tells me is, even if you have super high correlation for a couple of hour period on the way down, eventually over the next 2, 3, 6 months, you're going to see that dispersion come right back into the market. And I'm asking you, where do you think the dispersion happens now, given what we just saw? Where do you think the dispersion happens over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think we might have a reversal here of the layer one trade where Ethereum or I'm sorry, Solana and Avalanche have really stepped in at a great time to with their low transaction fees and low cost compared to Ethereum. Well, it's all been very jammed up and expensive with all the traction and NFT usage and whatnot. And so, but now you have a pretty interesting dynamic where you have these layer two scaling solutions all coming online, and you can see the TVL growth there coming up, and after having used many of them in trial periods. I think that speed and cost advantage that Solana and Avalanche have enjoyed is going to face some competition again from Ethereum. So I think that's an interesting place where we could see some outperformance from ETH, and then we the gaming the gaming trade seems to continue in certain areas. You just have tremendous interest there, global audience, and now there's this very new innovative way to fund it. So we're all over that in the new NFT fund, but those are two sort of market moves I see coming up that might be a change from where we've been over the last 6 months.
Yeah, and I think if we've learned anything from this asset class, it's that it's very highly correlated on the way down, but very uncorrelated on the way up. And unless we're facing another Armageddon scenario, which me personally, I think nowhere close to that. I think this is a healthy correction where leverage got wiped, equities corrected a little bit. But assuming we're not heading towards an Armageddon, you're going to see a lot of dispersion on the way back up here. And I think again, it'll be very sector specific, like you said. It'll be token specific, ecosystem specific. And if I can add a little more hope to the market as well, go back and look at the charts of December for the last 3 years. 2018, obviously a terrible year for the market. Right around December 15th is when the market bottomed, and it went straight up for the last 2 weeks and all the way into the first 6 months of 2019. Then, of course, at the end of 2019, the last 5 months, you had the plus token scam, kind of all kinds of selling pressure. What happened again? December 15th, right around where the market bottomed, off to the races the last 2 weeks of December and into the first few months of 2020, where we rocketed up until COVID dethroned us all. And then again, 2020, 2020 was a little different because we were already going higher in the beginning, towards the end of the year. But if you actually look at the first 2 weeks of December in 2020, the market was down about 10 or 15%. And then what happened? We've shot up about 50% for the last 2 weeks in December, and obviously carried that over to the first 4 months of 2021. So long story short, if this is just another pattern of corrections and not at all invalidating a bull run here, you should expect to see a pretty strong end of the year here. It's very unlikely that a market would top out in the middle of November for no reason, with interest rates at 1.5%, equities up 20%, digital assets up a couple 100%. In my opinion, very hard to get overly bearish here just because you had a pretty big correction here. So we'll see. We're on record here. Andew Stein is on record saying we're going to see dispersion over the next couple of months. I expect that as well. And we look forward to seeing what the market brings us. Any closing thoughts here, Andrew, before we let the audience go?
I'd say keep watching Luna's run. I mean, it's started here, but if this stablecoin picks up traction like it continues to, I think that could be a really good one to own over the next 6 to 12 months. So continue to be a lunatic.
And we'll leave a little cliffhanger for the audience as well. Andrew's also very bullish on Atom right now in the Cosmos IBC ecosystem. So you can hit Andrew on Twitter and ask your questions there. Andrew, where can people find you?
It's at Andrew_Stein_.
Perfect. And I'm, as always, at jdorman81. You can find Arca at ar.ca and read our blog every week. That's our 2 Satoshis. Andrew, thanks for joining me. See everybody next
Yep,
week.
thank you. See ya.